I'm Prudence Robertson. Tonight on EWTN News Nightly, Synod on Synodality. The Vatican releases the list of participants in the upcoming global gathering. We have a report from Rome. War in Ukraine. As President Joe Biden prepares to meet leaders of NATO, lawmakers on Capitol Hill continue their debate over funding the conflict. Christian persecution. A bishop from Pakistan tells us about daily life for the faithful in the country. And this never gets old. A new book examines ways to introduce children to Eucharistic Adoration. These stories and more tonight.
From EWTN, the Global Catholic Network, this is EWTN News Nightly.
Thank you for being with us on the feast of Pope St. Benedict XI. I'm Prudence Robertson, in for Tracy Sable. Our top story tonight, the Vatican has published the full list of participants for the Synod on Synodality in Rome this October. Nearly one-third of the 364 voting delegates were chosen by Pope Francis. EWTN News Vatican correspondent Colm Flynn has more.
Today, the Vatican published the full list of participants who will take part in the upcoming Synod on Synodality gathering in October. Nearly a third of the 364 voting delegates for the Synod have been chosen directly by Pope Francis. Some of the names include German Cardinal Muller and the American Cardinals Gregory of Washington, D.C., Cardinal O'Malley of Boston, and Cardinal Cupich of Chicago. Included in those nominations as well is the often controversial Jesuit, Father James Martin. The U.S. Bishops' Conference has elected 5 members to attend the assembly, including Cardinal Dolan of New York and the U.S. Conference President, Archbishop Broglio, and Bishop Barron of Minnesota. The Doctrine Committee head, Bishop Flores of Brownsville, who is leading preparations for the Synod for the U.S. bishops, will also be with them. The U.S. delegation features advocates for religious freedom, pro-life protections, and immigration. Interesting to note that for the first time, lay people will not only participate in the Synod of Bishops' Assembly, but they will also have the ability to vote on the final document. Of the more than 50 women voting, one is Nicaraguan Sister Valadares, who is known as the Tweeting Nun. She's the co-founder of iMission, an organization supporting the presence of the Church in the digital world. The delegates, including the religious and lay people, have been asked to discuss the questions posed in the recently published Instrumentum Laboris. That's a guide and workbook for the gathering that is around hot-button issues in the Church, such as women deacons, priestly celibacy, and LGBTQ outreach. In that same document, they are encouraged, those who will be involved in the Synod and those who will have the right to vote, to listen to the Holy Spirit and, quote, discern the sign of the times. We will have more on this from Rome on News Nightly this coming Monday, but for just now, in Rome, Colm Flynn, EWTN News Nightly.
And lawmakers in Maine have approved a bill that would expand access to abortion. The new bill would allow abortions at any time if deemed necessary by a doctor, a move that opponents say is too far. Democratic Governor Janet Mills is expected to sign the bill into law. President Joe Biden leaves Sunday for a trip to Europe. He plans to meet with England's King Charles III and the UK Prime Minister before attending a NATO summit, where the war in Ukraine remains the key topic.
NATO is stronger, more energized, and more united than ever. This is important for the security and safety of the American people, because a strong NATO makes the United States and the entire world more safe and more secure.
U.S. National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan also defends a controversial U.S. plan to send cluster bombs to Ukraine. Many countries, including some in NATO, ban those munitions since they too often hurt civilians.
The difference is that Russia is using cluster munition to attack, to invade Ukraine. Ukraine is using cluster munition to protect itself against an aggressor.
The head of NATO also seeks to convince Turkey and Hungary to allow Sweden to join the military alliance. Today, President Biden focused more on consumer issues. He said the economy added more than 200,000 jobs last month, and he announced a plan to limit short-term health insurance plans that could lead to higher medical costs. As we just heard, President Joe Biden is headed to Europe and meeting with NATO allies regarding the war in Ukraine. On Capitol Hill, the House and Senate remain divided on how much more aid the U.S. should give Ukraine and the type of weapons to authorize. Capitol Hill correspondent Eric Rosales has the latest.
Despite objections by some Democrats, the Biden administration has decided to send controversial cluster bombs to aid defense forces in Ukraine. So far, Congress has approved more than $100 billion in aid to Ukraine, money some senators say is well spent.
I think the Ukrainians deserve our support, not a blank check. But this is not costing one drop of American blood.
It's really important that, one, that it's lethal aid. Two, that Biden does everything he can to give them the aid now. Don't be prolonging this. Three, that Germany, France, and all of our allies are showing up and doing their part.
19 Republican lawmakers, though, have written President Biden saying that they do not support unlimited aid. Quote, unrestricted U.S. aid for Ukraine must come to an end, and we will adamantly oppose all future aid packages unless they are linked to a clear diplomatic strategy designed to bring this war to a rapid conclusion. But Senator Lindsey Graham says he supports sending advanced weaponry to Ukraine and has this message for naysayers.
The idea of defunding Ukraine at a time of great consequence to our nation is hard for me to wrap my head around.
But deep divisions are on display in the U.S. House. Speaker Kevin McCarthy says any more aid must meet the spending cap set by the recent debt limit deal. Democrats warn that cutting off aid will only encourage other countries like China to expand its military presence.
If we were to cut and run and abandon Ukraine, what does that mean for Taiwan? What does that mean for the other allies that we have in the Western Pacific? It means that China would be in a position to simply dominate them.
A group of bipartisan senators plan to join President Biden at the NATO summit, and I'm sure that they're going to have a lot to say when they return to Congress next week. At the Capitol, Eric Rosales, EWTN News Nightly.
Russia says for now there are no prospects for negotiations to end the war in Ukraine. The Kremlin says it has never shut the door to peace discussions and is blaming Ukraine and the Biden administration for a lack of progress in ending the conflict. U.S. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen continues her travels in China. Today, she met with one of the highest-ranking government officials in the communist country to discuss economic relations.
Our economic relationship with China must work for American businesses and American workers. I will always champion your interests and work to make sure there is a level playing field.
In her meeting with China's premier, Secretary Yellen emphasized a hope for more regular channels of communication. Her visit comes amid strained relations between Beijing and Washington.
我们积极参与国际竞图合作，坚决反对以竞图为由对别国进行抹黑攻击。
Meanwhile, officials in China are pushing back on claims that they are ignoring the fentanyl crisis in the country. The highly addictive painkiller is linked to tens of thousands of deaths here in the United States. Beijing says it is taking an active part in anti-drug programs and accuses the U.S. of not doing enough. We still have a lot more to come on EWTN News Nightly, including targeting the faithful. A bishop from Pakistan tells us about the country's controversial blasphemy laws. And the new book for parents who want to introduce their children to Eucharistic Adoration. Two Christian teenagers in Pakistan were arrested in May on charges of blasphemy. This after a policeman claimed he heard them being disrespectful of the Prophet Muhammad. Among Muslim-majority nations, Pakistan has the strictest blasphemy laws. Our own Tracy Sable recently spoke with a church leader from the South Asian nation.
Joining us now is Bishop Samson Shukardin from the Archdiocese of Hyderabad in Pakistan. Your Excellency, thank you so much for joining us today. We appreciate it. For those who are not aware, tell us more about the situation in Pakistan for religious minorities, in particular Christians.
Thank you very much, first of all, inviting me for this beautiful occasion. And as you know that in Pakistan, 96% are Muslims and only 4% are non-Muslims. And out of this, 1.6% are Christians. We are as the Christians, we have freedom to go to our churches. We have freedom to go for our services, whatever is religious things are. We are all freedom we have. But the issue is that there are few things which are really creating problem for not only for Christians but for others. One thing is the blasphemy law. This blasphemy law, which is started in 1980s, and since that time, many of them people who remain behind the bar, many Muslims, Christians, Hindus, and still this law is so much difficult and dangerous that we always feel uncomfortable. But beside this, we have more things also. For example, forced marriages are there, and also forced conversion are also there. Our girls, which are less than 14 or 16 years, by force they were kidnapped and converted to Islam, which is always very dangerous that in one night, how the girl is changed in her religion. It is all because of by force. Besides this, we have some other issues also regarding the celibacy that in the schools and in the colleges, the syllabus which is being taught in the school, they are very much related to the Islamic understanding. So we say that we all students, they are equal. The Christians and the Hindus, they should have their own religion things, and the Muslims, they could have their own religion things. And for this purposes, we wanted to know that there should not be hate material in the syllabus. If there is a hate material in the syllabus, then the problem comes that who it being formation to this kind of syllabus, they become very aggressive in the future.
I wanted to touch on now that recent attack at a Catholic school for girls in northeastern Pakistan. A police officer who is working for the school, as we know, shot a group of teachers and students, killing 2 young girls and injuring many others. What more can you tell us about this horrific incident and what was behind it?
That incident was very sad incident actually, and this has happened in the convent school, which is in Swat. And that is the police. He is a security person who was engaged there. And when the girls, after the afternoon, they were going back to their houses, the last vehicle which was going of the children, and this security person, police, he has opened the fire. And one girl died, and also 6 or 7 girls were injured. We condemn this. We condemn this. Though there were not any Christian girl in that, or Christian people were in that, but still we say that all human beings are equal, and we respect all human beings, and human rights should be equal for everyone. For protection of the children, protection of the people, protection of everyone.
Well, Your Excellency, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us about this very, very important issue. We really appreciate it. God bless you.
Thank you very much. God bless you too.
Up next on EWTN News Nightly, Just for Kids, a new book seeks to help children connect with Jesus. Plus, Stars of the Sea, why this Sunday is a day to honor those who work on the water. Many Christian communities around the world will come together this Sunday to celebrate and pray for those who work at sea. In many parts of the world, the second Sunday in July is referred to as Sea Sunday. The initiative began in England in 1975. It asks the faithful to remember seafarers, their families, and to pray for their safety doing dangerous but very vital work. Joining us now from Rome is Father Bruno Ciceri, former director of Stella Maris International. Father Bruno, welcome back. Thanks for joining us. Can you tell us more about this celebration? Why is it important and how did it begin?
See Sundays is usually celebrated the second Sunday of July. It started in the early 70s when all the different Christian denominations they gathered together and they established this day as a day of prayer and remembrance for the seafarers, fishers, and their family, because they play a very important role in our life, considering that 90% of the goods are transported by sea. And so we would like to invite all the Christian faithful in this day to pray for their safety, to pray for their family, and to remember that the sacrifice that they are doing, they are making our life much better.
Yes. And Father Bruno, Cardinal Michael Czerny, who's a prefect who ministers to seafarers and their families, he sent out a message in honor of Sea Sunday. What were some of the highlights of his remarks?
Yeah, the dicastery has been sending out this message already for several years. And I think the highlight of the message of Cardinal Czerny, there could be two. The first one is mentioning that the Christian faith was spread around the Mediterranean, around the world, by the apostles that they were sailing on boat and traveling around the world with the boat. So these things is still happening today because we have to consider that a great number of seafarers are Catholic, especially Filipinos or Indians from Goa. And with their example and the way that they live the faith while they are on board, they become an example for many others.
Very moving. And of course, we can always pray to Our Lady, the Star of the Sea, to intercede for sailors. Father, talk to me about some of the hardships seafarers are facing today. What sort of work are they doing? What is it like to be out at sea?
But first of all, the seafarers are far away from their family for months at the time. And so their family, they really suffer a lot because the seafarers usually cannot be part of important event of their children. So the children, they grow up generally without the presence either of the father or the mother. So they are far away from their family. Sometimes they are lonely. But also the other big problem I think that we are experiencing now, and is a very harmful inheritance that the seafarers they got from the pandemic, is the fact that they cannot have shore leave. So when they enter into port, even if they want to go ashore, even if they want to go out and go down from the ship, go to shopping and to relax and other things, for several reasons. Sometimes are the port authorities, sometimes is the ship owner. They are not allowed to go ashore. And this has really big consequences for their mental health.
Yes, well, this is something that people don't think about every day. So, Father Bruno Ciceri, I'm grateful for the work that you do for seafarers. Thank you for sharing with us about Sea Sunday. God bless you. The National Eucharistic Congress in Indianapolis is roughly 1 year from now, and a new book examines ways to introduce Eucharistic Adoration to children. Jesus and Me by Melissa Kirking offers guidance to young Catholics on how to spend meaningful time with our Lord. It focuses on 4 main types of prayer: adoration, gratitude, contrition, and petition. The book not only reminds children that Jesus wants to talk with them and listen to them, it also tells them ways to do just that. And we are now joined by the author of the book, Melissa Kirking, a mother and former teacher in both Catholic and public schools. Melissa, it's great to be with you. Thanks so much for joining us.
Yes, I'm happy to be here. Thank you.
Melissa, we've heard a lot about the Eucharistic revival that's happening here in America, spearheaded by our church leaders. And we, of course, want children to understand the beauty of the Eucharist as well. Talk to me about your inspiration to write a book about this, geared towards kids.
So many years ago, when I was teaching as a Catholic school teacher up in Ohio, and our priest at the time asked us to start bringing our children to First Friday Adoration. As a first grade teacher with 32 busy kids, I was like, whoa, Are you sure? Are you sure? But we started going, and it was so quickly I realized how meaningful it was for the children and how much they loved it. One time I had one little girl go, Mrs. Kirking, I felt him hug me. And just the depth of their feelings and their connection with Jesus really planted a seed deep in my heart to want to bring as many children as I could to know and love Jesus.
Well, and he says, let the little children come to me. Such a beautiful inspiration. Tell me more about the ways in which the book is really interactive, Melissa. I understand it provides a treasure trove of ways for kids to pray and learn to pray.
Right. So there are 80, color-coded prayer opportunities, including those 4 ways you talked about. There's all different ways from, imaginative prayers to where a child can imagine like they're a sponge absorbing Jesus's love. And then dripping it where they go. There's opportunities to write and journal. There's even some things where the children can use their fingers so that they have just a little bit of movement in what they're doing, or writing a song for Jesus. What my goal was to give children a spot they were comfortable to begin with, so they didn't have to wonder the why, the how, what am I supposed to do, and allow them that starting point, and then to stretch them into other ways to pray. And it also really does give a nice explanation of what adoration is, what it means, even the things you're supposed to do, like when you enter the chapel and you see Jesus there, that you double genuflect. So it really, I think, gives a nice blueprint for the children, an easy way for them to move forward.
It's so inventive. And Melissa, I'm not a parent, but I can imagine that it's hard to focus your children on prayer, especially in the midst of busy lives. Talk to me about how your book is going to help parents do that and teach kids really about the gift and the miracle of Jesus present with us in adoration.
Right. So, the book compares Jesus as your best friend, your divine friend, as Pope John Paul II said. And he, and so whether we have 5 minutes or 15 minutes or an hour, we would always like to spend that time with our friend. And since Jesus is our friend that desires the best for us, knows what's best, he's there for us at all times. We want to be able to spend that time with Jesus because, just like our earthly friends, if we are spending time with our friends, that's how we get to know them and trust them and become better friends with them, and to draw that connection for children to see that same way. But this is our God that is our friend.
Yes. And we have about a minute left, Melissa. On a personal note, I'm curious, what was your favorite part about writing this book?
Just the imaginative prayers. I loved just to be able to do some of that imagination with the children, because that's such a thing. Children are so big on their imagination, to be able to draw those connections for children.
Yes. Well, thank you so much, Melissa, for joining us. Before I let you go, where can people go to order the book?
Sure, ascensionpress.com, Jesus and Me. And there is even a free downloadable prayer prompt that people can use with their children about Jesus's love for them as they're waiting for their book to come.
Wonderful. Melissa Kirking, author of Jesus and Me, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Finally, tonight, Christie's of London just sold its most publicized painting of the summer season. It's a work by a 15th century Dominican friar, and it went for a record price. The painting by Fra Angelico went to an unknown buyer for around $6.4 million. Most of the known works of the Dominican brother are religious. Many are in the convent of San Marco in Florence. Fra Angelico was beatified by Pope John Paul II in 1982. We thank you for watching tonight. Remember, you can follow us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at EWTN News Nightly. And don't forget to tune in to EWTN Pro-Life Weekly on Thursday nights at 10 p.m. I'm Prudence Robertson. Good night, and God bless.